Welcome back to a special edition of the Foreign Desk. I'm Lisa Daftari. Tonight, missiles continue to rain down on Israel. More than 3,000 Hamas missiles have been launched into Israel in the past week. And as Israel continues to struggle looking for support and friends among nations and the media, it finds a friend in the most unlikely of places, Iranians, both inside and outside the country, coming out to show solidarity with the state of Israel. To discuss, we are joined by the Honorable Bijan Kian, a twice confirmed advisor to the White House under 3 consecutive administrations, reporting directly to Presidents Bush and Obama, serving as the deputy lead on President Trump's landing team for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, also an Ellis Island Medal of Honor recipient, globally recognized expert on the economy and national security, and he is currently the president of the Institute for Voices of Liberty. We are also joined by Adam Lovinger, who is currently the VP for Strategic Affairs at the Gold Institute for International Strategy. He's also an adjunct professor at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. He served as Senior Director for Strategic Assessments at the NSC under President Trump. And before that, strategist at the Office of Net Assessment at the Pentagon. And he also serves on the Institute of Voices of Liberty's Board of Advisors. I welcome you both to the program.
Thank you, Lisa. Glad to be with you.
So much to unpack tonight, and we only have an hour to do so. But I want to start with some of the current events coming out of the region tonight. Obviously, we're watching this unfold as we do, and it seems like every couple of years and sometimes couple of months, the escalations between Hamas, or I should say the Palestinians, whether they're under Hamas or Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, find some way to launch a terror attack against Israel. And we're always fighting for this, this support, or the media to understand the reality that's on the ground. Bijan, I'm going to start with you. You served under 3 administrations, and I know you've seen many of these escalations between the Palestinians and the Israelis come up. How would you assess the current situation in terms of what you've seen?
This one is a little different. You mentioned that Hamas missiles are raining on the people of Israel and killing innocent people. These missiles come from the Islamic Republic in Iran, Lisa. And of course, this is not the first time, but they've been supplying terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad with ammunition and serious weaponry to kill people. The other characteristic that makes this particular recent conflict a bit different is that we all know that a bunch of people in shower shoes and bathrobes are not going to be able to match the firepower of the Israeli Defense Forces, that's for sure. And what they're doing is they're mounting a media campaign. They're trying to capture the hearts and minds of the unaware. And of course, what the third factor that makes this a little different is that we see mainstream media, major media, is actually hiding the truth and reporting half the truth. Example of that, the office of Hamas in the same building as the major reporting agencies. So why are they hiding that? It's a good question to ask. But this is a media campaign. And sadly, because it's such a charade, because it's such a, theater, made-up theater, you see people dancing in the streets and singing songs and arousing emotions of the unaware in favor of only one side of the story. Half the truth is being broadcasted. And I want to thank you for taking the initiative to speak about the truth, which is what we're talking about tonight. This is a tragedy that is being fueled by one entity, and that is the Islamic Republic, I call it, in Iran, because it's so important to differentiate between Iran and the Islamic Republic in Iran. Iran is thousands of years old, a civilization that's respected, people that have accomplished so much throughout the history, an Islamic Republic in Iran is a 42-year-old juvenile delinquent, a criminal. Has to be differentiated between the two, Lisa.
Absolutely. Adam, you've also been, in Washington for quite a while and have seen different administrations come in and out. And obviously, if we juxtapose the current administration with the prior one, President Trump had a beautiful relationship with Israel, probably the closest we've ever seen, right? Moving of the embassy and doubling down on the Golan Heights. And then, the Abraham Accords, right? Bringing such prosperity to the peace-loving people of the Middle East and really bringing a significant change that will last for decades, for generations. But in terms of the current administration, I mean, we know that they did an about face on so many of the foreign policy moves of the prior administration. But with regards to Israel, I mean, if we take President Obama as the exception, perhaps, we've always seen bipartisan support. They're our ally. It's a no-brainer, right? We need them as the one democracy in the region to be, we need them as much as they need us, right? And people will always say we give them aid. Well, we also give aid to the Palestinians and to Pakistan, but we don't get anything in return, right? What are the long-term implications of, Biden waiting 3 weeks to give Bibi a call when he first came into office, and now being so cool on Israel with regards to what's currently happening?
Well, thank you, Lisa. One thing that is, quite extraordinary is that we've learned for, essentially since the 90s that we only really get progress in the Middle East and the peace process with the Palestinians, with the other Arab countries, and with Iran, when there is no daylight between the United States and Israel. What I mean by that is that when there is a sense, whether it's in Tehran or elsewhere, that Israel and the United States are not united, this sends the message that there is weakness, that there's not a united front. And weakness is provocative. We know this from history in the region. So to give credit to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton knew this, and so made it very clear to the Israelis that there would be no daylight between the two of the countries, and therefore we got the Oslo Accords and all the progress on that. This is a lesson that was taken up by the Bush administration. And what happened then in the Obama administration, which is now being repeated in the Biden administration, is a sense that if we can just provide some daylight, we'll be seen as a more even-handed arbiter in the region. And that this will somehow allow the United States to achieve its objective. What we're seeing is that when there is daylight, what you get is chaos and violence, because the forces in the region, they sense that there's weakness, they sense there's not a united front, and that is provocative. So really, truly, Biden is repeating the mistakes of the Obama administration without having learned that. And even after the Trump administration, which showed how much progress can be made with the Abraham Accords and other things, when Israel and the United States are united as two liberal democracies together fighting tyranny.
And I want to just follow up with you on that, because I couldn't agree more on this, the daylight analogy. The positioning of themselves vis-a-vis Israel, do you think it's more ideological or naivete?
That's a great question, Lisa. I don't really know. In some respects, it seems like it's ideological because the lessons of history are so clear. The track record is so clear that when there's daylight, you have tyranny, you have terrorism, you have problems. When there's no daylight, you get great leaps and bounds in the direction of peace. So it could be just a complete ignorance of history. And it's a tremendous disservice to the people on the ground. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see how the Palestinians are turned into cannon fodder for this, and of course the Iranian people are being thrown to the wolves by empowering the regime by starting up the JCPOA again. Mm-hmm. And so for a administration that is focused, and Biden publicly stated before two houses of Congress several months ago that he would be focused on promoting liberal democracy and not authoritarianism. It's just doing the opposite. So it's very confusing for those in the region and as well for Americans as to what is truly the motivation. These are mixed signals, and this sort of uncertainty when it comes to these basic intentions never ends well.
You know what the irony is how, you look at history, as you said, and these Arab nations have learned to look at history and say, look, it's not getting us anywhere. So let's put our ideological differences aside and focus on logic. And if we sign on to the Abraham Accords, and if we make peace with Israel and we move forward with our interests only, meaning economic prosperity and tourism and water irrigation secrets and apps and technology, we'll be better off. So they were able to put their differences aside. And this week, we saw more support for Israel by a UAE minister on social media, what went viral, than we are getting from our own White House. And, speaking of which, that's why I brought you two on tonight to talk about the irony of having, the Iranian people from inside Iran tell the world that we are actually on the side of the Israelis, not the Palestinians, not what you may think. In the beginning of the Iranian Revolution, it was death to Israel, death to America. But now there's a different slogan on the streets of Tehran, and I want you to take a listen. So this actually is from a protest of a couple of years ago in Tehran, and the protesters are chanting "Death to Palestine," which is very, very interesting because the regime would like us to think that that the Iranian people are they have this brotherhood with the Palestinian people, but it's just the opposite. And the two of you are on, and myself, I should be very transparent about this. So the two of you are on the advisory board. Bijan Kian is the president of a group called the Institute for the Voices of Liberty. It's a group, a non-profit, non-partisan organization that is dedicated to echoing the voices and the sentiments of the Iranian people inside Iran, to give them a platform. And I am also a member of this board. Even though I'm a journalist, I never sign on to any organizations or boards, but this is a no-brainer for people like myself and the two of you to really just continue doing the work that I do as a journalist, or the two of you as experts and as statesmen, to give them a platform, to give them a chance at getting their voices heard. And with that, today, the Institute for Voices of Liberty released a letter that's going to be signed by hundreds. I said we quoted 200, but I think that's on the lower side. We're going to get many more hundred prominent Iranians to sign a letter in support and in solidarity of the people of Israel. And I just want to read just a few lines, because I think this is such a tremendous message that you're sending the people inside of Israel from the people of Iran. But as I pull that up, I want to go to you first, Bijan. What was the idea behind issuing such a letter? Where did it start from, and what prompted you to put this out?
Well, that's a very good question, Lisa. First, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Adam for being the voice, being the reflectors of the voices of freedom-seeking people of Iran. I also want to thank members of the board of directors and all of the trustees of the Institute for Voices of Liberty, an organization that I'm honored to serve currently as president. And I also want to answer your question about the motivation behind this statement. I'm really glad that you showed a clip of Iranians shouting "Death to Palestine." Now, I'm not one who would go around and call for death for anyone, but I'm just repeating what I heard. And I'm thanking you for that, because if you hadn't done that, someone watching this program would say, that Bijan Kian, he loves Israel, and he's a Zionist, and he comes out in support of Israel. But regardless of my personal feelings, I have to say this clearly. The Institute is just following its mission and its charter. the Institute came out and said, we reflect the voices of freedom-seeking people of Iran. And we defined it. We didn't define it. Freedom-seeking people of Iran defined it for us. They said, we reject entirety of the Islamic Republic in Iran, and that's what the Institute stands on. And that's what we've all signed up to support and reflect. Now, going to the question, what prompted us to do this? Again, if you hadn't broadcasted that clip, I would have had to explain this a lot. You heard it. We are reflecting those voices. They reached out to us and they said, hey, didn't you say that you're going to reflect our voices? Get out there and say, look, we are suffering here for many reasons, but here are a couple. Number one, we, the Iranians, would not want to be looked at as responsible for this violence. We are not to be looked at as people who finance terror. It is our government. It's the Islamic Republic in Iran that's doing this, but separate our account from them. That's message one. The other message they're asking us to convey and relay to whoever is willing to listen to the truth, whole truth, not half-truths, is that, look, we hear that a missile can pay for 5,000 vaccines. We want the world to know that our government, whose main responsibility is to protect our rights, to protect our life, to provide for our security, is spending the equivalent of 5,000 vaccines on missiles to go kill people instead of saving our lives. That's the height, the zenith of incompetence. And they want the world to know how incompetent, how corrupt, how violent, what a terrorist organization is called the Islamic Republic in Iran. They're a bunch of terrorists. Their military is nothing but terrorists in uniform. That's all. And that's what the people of Iran wanted us to come out and clearly say it without being worried about, oh, you know, we're going to be called Zionists, this, that, the other. We're not afraid. We're not afraid, and we tell the truth and the whole truth as we see it. And they asked us to do it, Lisa. We're doing it on the request of Iranian people. Our personal opinions aside, the board of directors, trustees, advisors are asked to reflect this truth and nothing but the truth. That's the motivation behind it.
I was asked on Twitter by many people if you could mention some of the more prominent signatories to this letter, Mr. Kian.
Well, you know, the prominent signatories to this letter are sitting right here. You can look at them. So I'm not calling myself prominent, but you and Adam certainly are very prominent in the community, and there are individuals who each hold their own in their experience. We have amongst the signatories, those who approved this letter, are individuals who have served the United States government in the highest positions, and currently some of them are members of the board, and some of them are the trustees, and the community is very proud, very grateful to all of you prominent individuals, not me. I exclude myself. I'm very humbled to be in the service of very prominent people at the Institute for Voices of Liberty. But the numbers are too many. Actually, if you want to find more evidence of this support, you have to go no further than Los Angeles, California. We're a political party, actually. The Constitutional Party of Iran, CPI, has issued a letter of support in support of the State of Israel and in opposition to the violence that's taken place, specifically being fueled by the Islamic Republic in Iran. So we're not alone, and the credit should go to every single person who reached out to us, various people from inside Iran who said, hey, we can't say these things as publicly, although a lot of them are so courageous and so brave. They don't care. They tweet with their real names. And, you know, Adam said it back in 2016 so beautifully. He said, you know, there is fear, there's honor, and there's interest. And right now, the people of Iran will do what it takes to change the balance so that their government is more afraid of them than they are afraid of their government. And their honor is going to go up. And of course, shame will be the only thing attached to the Islamic Republic in Iran. So this is not a publicity show. This is real. People of Iran, you just heard them. You certainly heard more than 200 people shouting, "Death to Palestine." Again, I'm not repeating that. I'm not saying death to Palestine, but they were saying it. You could see the sentiment. You could see why. And I gave you just two reasons why, two real reasons. I say, hey, that's our money. You buy missiles to go kill people, buy vaccines to save our lives. That's the message.
Right, absolutely. I want to read some of this, some excerpts of the letter so people get a better idea of what this entails. We wrote about it today as an exclusive at foreigndesknews.com, so those who are interested can read further. The letter starts, "We are a part of a community of millions of Iranian expatriates driven from our homes and our homeland to escape the tyranny of the Islamic Republic in Iran. We deeply appreciate the blessings of freedom extended to us by the Western societies that gave us refuge." And it goes on and on to say, "We condemn the acts of terror committed by Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Lebanese Hezbollah, and other proxies of terror supported and subsidized by the Islamic Republic. We mourn the deaths of innocent Israelis and Palestinians and deplore the Iranian regime's exploitation of Palestinians, Lebanese, and Houthis." And the line that I found most interesting was, "We stand in solidarity with the people of Israel and yearn for the day when a free Iran can once again renew the historic ties of friendship that have existed between Iran and Israel." Mr. Kian, I just want to continue with you and then move on to Adam for more policy-based stuff. But a lot of people don't recognize or realize that there is a history, a deep history between Israel and Iran. Can you touch upon that a bit? And what would that look like going forward if they were to reunite again?
I will share personal stories with you. There was a day in Iran that if someone was afflicted with incurable disease, something that was really, stage 4 cancer and horrible, horrible diseases, Israel was the hope of last resort. People would say, send them to Israel. And the relationship had elements of respect for competence. It had elements of love, we have a history. We have a history. There was a Jewish queen whose eternal resting place is in Hamadan, is in Iran. The history of the friendship between the Iranians and people of Israel goes back a very, very long time into the history, thousands of years. And of course, when people ask a question about, why are you supporting the state of Israel? And you're American. What's your business to support the state of Israel? What I say to them is, yes, my blood is Iranian. I was born in Iran. That's the same land where Cyrus the Great came from. And Cyrus the Great was the first head of a state in the history of mankind to support Israel and to support Zionism. He took money out of the treasury of Persia at the time and helped to build the temple. I'm not saying that. It's being mentioned in the holiest books, I'm told 23 times. So, that history goes back very strong. Today, the Iranian youth are really yearning for a day where they could do things together. The scientists doing joint projects together. You mentioned the water issue. Iran is drying up thanks to the incompetence of the managers of Islamic Republic who have killed water resources. Iran is not short of water resources. It's just the way it's been mismanaged. And, Israeli youth and Iranian youth can get together to address these in many, many areas. Even short term, they can do things to help out in agriculture, in food,
Mr. Kian, I have
in industry.
You actually sparked a question that I think a lot of people may have. What Why did the Jews in Israel become the easy target for the Islamic Republic from day one when they came into power? How did the Jews become the boogeyman, so quickly, and how did it, sustain this 42-year period?
Yeah, I have my own personal opinion, and it may or may not be a statement of fact, but I'll share my opinion with you. To start with, this Islamic Republic in Iran is the first government in the world who came to power through terror. Actually, the first government in the history that took Americans hostage and then negotiated their release for a non-intervention sort of agreement, which was signed the day before President Reagan took office, actually. So extortion, legal extortion. They signed an agreement in exchange for taking hostages. They were born. This government was born in terror, and it has continued with terror. So why is it such a surprise for the government of Islamic Republic to align its goals and its strategies based on terror and attach itself? A commander of the Revolutionary Guard raised his hand in an interview, and it wasn't photoshopped or anything, raised his hand and said, this hand created Hezbollah. So why is it a surprise that a terrorist government would align itself with the goals and affiliate itself with terrorist entities? There's another reason. They're cowards. They're cowards. They have not won a war ever. And they hide behind proxies. So they create Hezbollah to create a proxy to be able. But why do they choose these terror groups? Because they use them. They use them. They are the insurance mechanism for the Islamic Republic. When things get really serious between the people of Iran and the government of Islamic Republic, you see all these people with covered faces all of a sudden arrive, and they beat up the Iranians and they run over them with cars and they kill them. Are they Lebanese or are they Iranians? Are they Palestinians or are they Iranians? I don't know. Their faces are covered. But why are their faces covered? Because they don't want to show. Some people have said that they speak Arabic. There's no secret that Hashd Shabi from Iraq was in Iran. So it's a two-way relationship. One, they have no other friends. They have to affiliate with the terrorists. And of course, how do they do that? By attacking Israel. But the question to ask is, what have the Jews done to the Iranians? What have they done? What is it that make the government of Islamic Republic, as idiotic as they are, to expect the Iranians to believe the lies and the deceit that Jews have done something bad to them and they should shout death to Israel? For what? What did they do exactly to do that? And coming to Palestinians, Palestinians are Sunnis. They are Sunni Muslims. If they care so much about the Sunni Muslims in Israel, why don't they care about their Sunni Iranians in Iran, in southeast Iran? They don't have even ID cards. They don't have food. They don't have schools. You worry about the Palestinians? Shame on you, Islamic Republic. I would look, if they're looking and listening, shame on you for killing your people and giving money to kill other people. Palestinians and Israeli children, a bullet does not have an address on it. It kills both, and it doesn't matter. And it's a tragedy. When a Palestinian child dies, an innocent, unarmed person who is not a combatant in this conflict dies, the Islamic Republic should be responsible for it, should be held responsible for it. This is a crime of scale that I cannot even begin to explain. So I hope I've answered that question for you, Lisa.
Yes, absolutely. And Adam, I want to move over to, some of the more macro questions here. Obviously, as Bijan outlined, there's no secret anymore. There's no, it's all transparent. It's all out there. I mean, we know that the weapons are coming from the Islamic Republic. We know that they're funding Hamas, that they're funding the Houthis, that they're funding Hezbollah, that they're in Iraq, that they're in Syria, that they're in Lebanon. And yet, we have lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle warning the president and Blinken from going forward with the deal in Vienna. And yet on Friday, we covered this at the Foreign Desk. On Friday, Antony Blinken actually said, I do not know, I cannot confirm yes or no if there's a connection between Hamas and the Islamic Republic. We actually have proof of this, right? The missiles literally can say from Tehran with love, and they still would not believe or want to acknowledge this connection. I mean, how does this work? I mean, who advises the president on these matters? Why aren't they listening? You have 80 million people, the majority of whom are saying death to Palestine. They're saying we don't want this. They're saying this is not our fight to fight. There's another slogan that was very popular on the streets of Iran that was "Na Gaza, na Lebanon, janam fadai Iran," which translates into "Not Gaza, not Lebanon. I live only for Iran." Also showing that pivot in the Iranian people. This is not our fight to fight. We want to stay Iranian. We are Iranian, and our funds should be spent on us. Why aren't they listening?
Yeah, Lisa, it's a good question. And having lived in Washington for several decades now, I am saddened to say that my assessment really boils down to Tip O'Neill's assessment, which is that all politics are local. And what I mean by that is that Washington politics have become so divisive. There's been there's this sort of new sport that a new administration comes in, wants to sort of wipe clean all the successes of the prior administration and put their own stamp on their policy, on foreign policy. And I am just, stunned. The deafening silence. The American people rejoice in the Abraham Accords. It is a tremendous strategic victory that cannot be reversed. Once you've crossed that point, there is no going back. But for some reason, the current administration is trying its hardest to reverse those great successes that the American people recognize. And it's really quite callous, because instead of building upon that success, they're trying to tear it down. And we're seeing now, Lisa, the fruits of that, which is that innocents, Israelis, Palestinian civilians, and the Iranian people themselves are being butchered because of this. And so, perhaps in Washington, D.C., it's a game. It's the game of politics. But this has real world consequences. And it is a sign to me that there's just a lack of seriousness. There's a lack of actually caring about these people and caring about their future, and just wanting to, create a foreign policy legacy. It's very callous, it's very selfish, and it's destructive, not only for the people in the region, but for the American people as well.
What can be done in terms of, let's go back to IVOL and Adam. I know your expertise is obviously strategy, looking at the bigger picture moving forward. What can be done for the Iranian people that, if there is a deal, there isn't a deal, there are sanctions, there's no sanctions, what can be done for the future of the Iranian people?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I'm so attracted to IVOL is that it's an organization that that's really breaking the mold, but in a very obvious way. We want to give the people of Iran a voice. The people of Iran, for far too long, I was in the Pentagon, Lisa, in 2009 when the Green Revolution unfolded. And it was very clear to me that the Islamic regime in Tehran was really in pretty bad shape. But instead of tipping it over the edge, instead of embracing the people who wanted their freedom, who were chanting in the streets, Obama, Obama, where are you? America, where are you? Wanting their freedom, taking tremendous risks, and being taken out by snipers on apartment blocks in Tehran for their courage and protesting, instead of lifting up the people and giving them what they wanted, and riding that momentum to essentially bring Iran back to its destiny, which is a tolerant, peace-loving country that is, it's a tremendous civilization that has so much to contribute to the world. And instead of bringing it on that course, for this reason that is it's quite troubling, the Obama administration normalized, essentially took the regime, back into the family of nations and normalized it, dignified it. And this is just, it's something that the American people, this is so alien to us. We don't do this. Ronald Reagan, who stood before the Berlin Wall and looked at Gorbachev and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." This is what the American people stand for. It's not normalizing authoritarian regimes when they're on their, on their heels.
Right. What,
Lisa, I want to add something to that. I think it's important what Adam mentioned, that I believe this administration is more interested in winning the next election, and they believe that the Americans are attracted, or they're part of America that voted for the current ruling party in the White House, is going to be very attracted to the idea of them wiping out everything that the 45th president of the United States, Donald Trump, did, and they think, okay, America is going to be embracing us because of that. Where they go wrong, and I am not happy saying this, but I predict America is going to wake up and say, so this is what you meant? This is what you meant by creating a world that is more chaotic, a world that our friends feel like they're our enemies, and our enemies get love from us as if they're friends? Is this the world you meant to create? Is this the sophistication in what somebody calls responsible statecraft, to treat your friends like your enemies and your enemies like your friends? And they're going to say, no, I'm sorry. By the way, I did not elect a member of the Congress of the United States to go and praise, instead of protecting me, praise the people who want to kill me. How do you explain that?
But I wonder,
you're elected to represent my interest, and yet you're representing the interest of people who want to kill me. That doesn't make sense. I predict people are going to change, and this administration, including, by the way, Secretary Blinken, who could not, somebody told me he could not remember the title of Abraham Accord. So what's that? That agreement, something was signed. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but if it is accurate, then it is too transparent. A professional, and I believe Secretary Blinken is, will not do that. It looks like, you're trying to wipe out the significance of something that is going to be there in the history as the greatest change that took place in the Middle East. So that's something I just wanted to add to what elegantly was said by Adam.
Yeah, I actually have this debate in some capacity every single day, and that is whether or not, Bijan, what you said, it will happen, or if we're moving the goalposts so far that, enemy and friend will be flip-flopped in the eyes, especially of young people in this country. Or whatever goes wrong, it'll be, well, we inherited that from the Trump administration. That's why X, Y, and Z unfolded. Unless, I don't know, gas prices stay so high that people come to their senses. I can't see, things going.
Gas prices are going to do it. You're right.
Well, yeah. Particularly in terms of foreign policy, I don't think anybody has a handle on anything. And being woke is just being on the side of, the underdog, whatever the social justice movements of our time are dictating. So if it's Black Lives Matter and now it's Palestinian Lives Matter, they're not even looking at the history or the nuance, or getting back into the Iran nuclear deal. It just sounds like kumbaya. So why not? If you're against it, you're the terrorist. It's everything is so flip-flopped. Adam, and in terms of just, you have such an expansive just resume and experience in Washington, being at the Pentagon and having, being privy to so many of these conversations. And I think I want to just hear your overarching take on what's happening in the world, especially here in this country, in terms of foreign policy, in terms of the social justice movements, in terms of just everything changing.
Yeah, so really, happy to chat about that, and just really to put a further sort of iteration of the theme we're talking about. What I've what I'm seeing, Lisa, is that unfortunately there is a party in this country that is essentially, looking to normalize our adversaries. I've studied this extensively, and then essentially, call that a victory. So giving Iran what it wants, and then calling that a victory, giving China what it wants, and then calling that a victory, giving Russia what it wants, and then calling that a victory. And it is really sort of a fraud on the American people. And when you look at it from again, from a domestic political standpoint and winning elections, sadly, a lot of Americans do not, follow foreign policy and are not so knowledgeable about it. I mean, of course, they have to make a living, and this is in some respects a luxury. But I see it as a cynical exploitation of the American people by, using, fancy words like Obama talked about restoring balance in the Middle East. This was one of the justifications for the Iran deal. Balance. Well, what is that balance? Well, when you actually look at it, it's balancing the state of Israel, because that's the balance that he was working toward. Right. So this is this, cynical manipulation of the American people. It strengthens our adversaries, and if the Democrats can get away with spinning this successfully as, all right, empowering our adversaries is a victory, is a foreign policy success, is a foreign policy legacy that is worthy of this nation, then they've really pulled the ultimate sort of Orwellian scheme off on the American people. And this can only go on so long until it crashes down. And I really do think that what we're seeing now with the carnage in the Middle East, this would not have happened if there was daylight if there was no daylight between Israel and the United States. If we had kept with the Abraham Accords built on that and kept the sanctions on the Islamic Republic, the strategic momentum would be so overwhelming that you would genuinely have peace breaking out in the Middle East right now. I have friends who are Israelis, and I have friends who are from Arab countries inking deals with one another right now.
Right.
And it's almost like a love at first sight. It's really this. I mean, it is an flowing pent up sort of need that's been suppressed for so long, and it is a momentum that is so positive, but it's being completely dashed, frankly, by this normalization of this the thug in the neighborhood, the Islamic Republic, and it's it really beggars belief. One of the other sort of schemes that seems to be played out is that just last month, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was talking about the purpose of the ongoing negotiations in Vienna, and he said that they're trying to figure out which nuclear restrictions Iran will accept on its program to ensure that they can never get a nuclear weapon. This is the sort of classic. He's a Yale educated lawyer. They're talking about, let's get the documents just right. Let's make sure, we got all the provisions here. But we all know, I mean, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We all know the Islamic Republic cheats. They cheat overwhelmingly. So much so that, just last month, 3 European intelligence agencies in Germany, Sweden, and the Netherlands came out with separate reports, all documenting how the Islamic Republic is seeking weapons of mass destruction, seeking nuclear weapons, and how they've been cheating on the Iran deal. And how much longer does the Biden administration truly think the American people are so stupid that we really just don't see this? If our European allies are highlighting this, what is wrong with us?
Well, are they wrong, Adam? Are they wrong? Do people actually see this? Are people even in tune to what's going on or what the details are? And talk about the leverage that was forfeited. They came in with all of this leverage with regards to Iran that was built up during the Trump years, and they just gave it away. When they're campaigning on, we will get back into the Iran nuclear deal, it's like sitting across the table from someone and they already know you're going to give in. So of course they're going to get the wording just right. They don't want to, they don't want to hear no. They want the deal to go through. The question I get asked very often, Adam, is, why didn't this conflict, this escalation between Hamas and Israel, or why didn't Hamas begin attacking Israel during the Trump years? I mean, the embassy was moved. There was the Golan Heights issue. We had more settlements coming in without a real stop from Bibi's government. And, you had the Abraham Accord. So why did Hamas wait to do it now?
Yeah, so it's very interesting, Lisa, from my vantage point in the government. When Trump was elected, we got very strong signals from our adversaries that they were afraid. And that is a very good thing. We want our adversaries, the authoritarian, ruthless regimes, to be afraid of America. And they were afraid of President Trump. They were not afraid of President Obama, and they're not afraid of Joe Biden, unfortunately. And part of this, as a strategist, it beggars belief that the United States announces when we are going to, leave our, various, war zones. We announce this to the enemy. These are just like, amateur maneuvers. But maybe this is what happens. I mean, when you don't take, strategy seriously, when you have amateurs, running the place, and you have ideologues that actually, see America as an imperialist power, and that we need to be cut down to size because we're going to go in and smash things up. And
right.
And there is this view, unfortunately, growing on the Democratic Party and the more progressive sides of the Democratic Party, that America is this hegemonic power that needs to be cut down to size because we're so dangerous. We're a dangerous nation, which is even the name of a book. But it's this is very dangerous. This worldview, because as we all know, power abhors a vacuum. So if America's not powerful, that power goes somewhere. And the alternatives, whether it's the People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, etc., these are all very bad contenders to fill that power vacuum. And so it's imperative that America doesn't. We do not, give up on our historic and much needed quest for primacy, for a U.S.-led liberal global order focused on rule of law, democracy, freedom, human rights, all those are things that we stand for. You asked about the American people previously, Lisa. Poll after poll show that the American people want America to play a leading role in the world, want America to support our democratic allies, want America not to normalize authoritarian genocidal regimes like the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so there's really, my sense in the Democratic Party is that there are the elites, there are the coastal elites in the Hollywood, Wall Street, the swamp in Washington, D.C., who have this outsized influence. And then there is, a lot of, voters who are not those elites, who are manipulated and actually really get the short end of the stick quite frequently. And it's a very cynical game. It's very cynical. For example, I'm now working more in finance and economics these days. And under the Trump administration, you had great economic growth in this country before the COVID pandemic, and the Americans who profited most, who saw their standard of living rising the most during the Trump administration, were Hispanics and Blacks, not whites. But this, of course, is not covered by the mainstream media because that does not fit this comfortable narrative.
Right.
And so the cynical game that's played to manipulate the American people, in some respects, it's the same cynical game that is being played by the leadership of Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and the Islamic Republic of Iran to manipulate their people. So the people get left out in the cold. The leaders get reelected, enriched, their power grows, and the purpose of iVOL is to reverse that. Of course, we're not focused domestically; we're focused abroad. The Iranian people, to give them a voice. shift the balance of power between the regime and the people themselves.
Oh, perfect. Adam, segue for me perfectly a few times tonight. I want to just even out the show and end on this question for you, Bijan, is really to look at this situation with Iranians coming out in support of Israel as really a historic. It's a historic thing. It's not quite the level of the Abraham Accords, but I would say it's on par with getting to that direction, moving in that direction where the people of Iran say, stop, we want a different trajectory for our future, which I think is quite significant. My question to you, Bijan, is together with iVOL and all of the efforts that you're making, including this initiative with the letter, and I will provide a link for those who may want to sign the letter. Perhaps we can have our audience members who'd like to sign the letter also use the link that I will post on the program when we post it online as well. What I'd like to ask you is, how are we going to use this momentum, this moment? How are we going to seize this moment to move forward and use the energy of the Iranian people for good, for their future?
That's a very good question. I like to start where Adam ended. The charter, and you spoke about the Institute for Voices of Liberty, iVOL. We exist to primarily reflect the voices of freedom-seeking people of Iran, and that's our main mission and charter. And I know that one of the things that Adam is planning to do is to make himself available with some other friends to be able to get together with a hopefully very large number of Iranians from Iran. Thankfully, these days with Clubhouse and Space and other means, that is not such a difficult thing to do. But it's important for us, Adam in particular, who would be leading the work of the strategy at the Institute for Voices of Liberty, to hear what they want. We want to stay loyal to our charter. Our charter says, listen to the Iranian people, do the political interpretation in a way that decision makers will understand why they should care about what's going on in Iran. The issue with the anger you hear and you see from Iranian people in siding with Israel comes from their absolute dislike. I don't want to say hate, but I could use that word because that's truly what it is. Iranians hate the regime. They don't want this regime. A survey came out that 71% of the eligible to vote will not vote in the upcoming election. Our efforts will continue. This letter is not the end, it's the beginning. And we will continue to reflect the voices of freedom-seeking people of Iran. And as I said, Adam is actually inviting people to come and tell Adam and others at the Institute for Voices of Liberty exactly what they want us to say. We continue listening. We continue to repeat what they say, not our words, their words. And we make sure we don't choose and pick what we convey. We convey all that they say in its entirety. However, we do not reflect the voices of everybody. We have no interest in reflecting the voices of so-called reformers. There is no such thing. That's a lie. That's deceit. We only reflect the voices of people in Iran who reject the entirety and the totality of the Islamic Republic and its constitution and its military force and its affiliated institutions and people, all of that. So I like to ask you this. People ask me, Lisa's programs are in English. They ask me, can we translate it? Can we do this in Farsi? I don't know. I tell them I have no such authority to say these things. That's up to Lisa and Foreign Desk. But what should we tell them? Can they translate this in Farsi?
Yes,
and put it out and distribute that? Can I be carrying your message to them and tell them they can do that? Because they really want to do this. They want to listen. They want to come and listen to Adam and others, not just from Institute of Voices of Liberty, Institute for Voices of Liberty, but from anyone who is willing to reflect their voices. Recently, I've been encouraging them to put together events in English, because if they want the world to hear what they said, just like the chanting in the summer of '09 when they were saying, Obama, Obama, are you with us or are you with them? Which in Farsi, it's a play on words because Obama means he is with us. That the name means he's with us. But unfortunately, that's not how things worked out. And history is going to record that as a tragedy. I believe my old boss is going to carry that with him for the rest of his political life. You said no to people who reached out to say, Mr. President, you are the leader of the free world. We are reaching out to you. Would you help us? And he said no. Emphatically, no, I'm not with you. That's it. He signed the JCPOA, the deal that was actually written by advocates for Islamic Republic in the United States and in Europe. And that's another story for another program.
I was going to say, I think we can have another program about that, and hopefully the two of you will agree to come back.
That's an interesting history. Where was JCPOA drafted and by whom? That's an interesting question.
And how and are we going to sign another one that has similar wording and perhaps fewer gains for the United States?
The way we define victory these days is we ask our enemies, how would you like to defeat me? What's the most convenient way for you? And then we call that a victory. That's just like Adam said it.
Right. It goes along with like everyone getting a trophy. We don't want anyone to feel left out, right? You also you get to write your deal. You get to write the nuclear deal. You get to write the nuclear deal. I thank you both for being here for a wonderful discussion. And
pleasure to be with you anytime.
Back.
And thank you, and Adam, for all you do, and all the members of Institute for Voices of Liberty who work every day to reflect the voices of freedom-seeking people of Iran. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. We'll have to leave it there. And for those of you at home who would like to sign up for our daily email, you can go to foreigndesknews.com/newsletter. And to sign up for our podcast, you can go to iTunes or on YouTube, youtube.com/Lisa Defteri to sign up there. You can get our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are on all platforms, and we will see you next time. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.